I'm going to be actually sharing my screen and sharing the work that we've been, the ESAC Faith Accommodations Working Group has been doing along with the Alliance for Educators of Muslim Students. And so my name is Kevin Merkley. I'm principal at Stonebridge Public School. And I'll pass it over to my team to share.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Fahima Raufi, and I'm a grade 5 teacher at EVS 1. And I guess we'll get started. So as educators, it is our responsibility in ensuring that every one of our students has a sense of security, they feel welcome, and are included inside our spaces that we have created within our classroom walls. I find that one of the difficulties Muslim students face is simply the constant pressure of having to defend themselves or having to explain themselves, in some cases being singled out in front of their peers. With the rise of Islamophobia and the anti-Muslim narrative that the media constantly portrays, it makes it much more imperative that this resource is made and accessible for all of us. I also just wanted to highlight that there are various ways that our students may identify as being Muslim. Like other religious groups, Muslims are diverse and should not be classified by a stereotype or a homogeneous group.
Thank you, Fahima. So my name's Hannah Koster, and along with Andre Green, we are the co-chairs of the Professional Learning Working Group, and we'd like to thank Roy and Lee, Curriculum Coordinator of Culturally Relevant and Responsive Pedagogy, for welcoming us into this space to share this important work. I want to just take a little bit of time to introduce the team behind the creation of this document. Kevin Merkley, Jillian Stambulich, Mohaditha Champsi, Fatima Jessa, Fahima Raufi, Sayeda Datu, and Rizwana Kadardina. So it's so great to see so many of you come out and learn and familiarize yourselves with how you can best support your Muslim students and staff during Ramadan. So thank you for taking this initial step in being present during today's session. And this work being a collaboration, like Kevin mentioned, between ESAC, Faith Accommodations Working Group, and AEMS, the Alliance of Educators for Muslim Students. So this document we will be presenting is here to support the release of the March 9th memo. So welcome, everyone.
Okay, thanks very much, Hina. So you'll see up on the screen, what I am sharing with you is what has been shared with the system. And you'll notice that they are Google Slides, and it's best shown in present mode, okay? And so it actually wouldn't hurt for you today to actually click on the memo, and if maybe someone could add the link to the chat to make it accessible so that you can navigate it yourself and find out how it works as we talk you through this. So this is this is suggested language that could be used to share with staff in a weekly memo, okay? And so whether it be a weekly memo or your upcoming April staff meeting memo, this is suggested communication. So for administrators, this is you could simply take this, cut and paste it, and put it into communication that you're sharing with your staff. And we wanted to make that easy for everybody to highlight first the memo, but also the supporting resource. And so it's important to note that we're asking members of our school communities to listen and learn so that we can understand how to accommodate during this time. And we recognize that we have worked in the past in supporting our students and staff during Ramadan, but that may not work this year, right? As Ryan said, it's a unique year. And so we're going to have to be creative and innovative within our buildings to put in place what's needed to let our students and our staff know that they matter and belong. And since this message is kind of an operations piece, as a school leader, I need to think differently about how I may have supported my students and my staff during Ramadan in the past. I'm going to have to think about that differently. I've got protocols, COVID-19 protocols that we need to follow. We can't mix cohorts. And so all of these pieces are just opportunities for creative solutions. And so, for example, here at Stonebridge, we're less than half of a school. And so I have 11 empty classrooms. I have 6 portables that are air conditioned, that are in a single hallway that I could either have a lay assistant or a staff member. It could be part of their duty. I could have students in classrooms, you know, two groupings at a time to ensure that we're not mixing cohorts beyond the protocols that are in place. So again, there may be challenges, but to me, this, as a school leader, this is an opportunity to be creative, to ensure that our students feel that they matter and that they belong during this time, to be able to support them.
Hi.
And Fatima.
Yes. Hi, I'm Fatima Jessa. I am an administrator as well with the board, and I'm also a co-chair of AEMS, the Alliance of Educators for Muslim Students. And as you've already heard, even with Kevin's his example of how at Stonebridge he's creating an identity-affirming space for our Muslim learners, it's really important for us to continue considering that the faith, the Islamic faith, is part of the identity of a Muslim student. And so you can't just pull that out. It's part of their social identity. And we should continue to view it as an asset rather than a deficit, as in, oh, there's something more I have to add on. It's part and parcel of creating this identity affirming spaces. And what is wonderful about this resource is it's actually very intentional, the supports that have been embedded within it. So it brings to focus some of the questions and some of the considerations that we have in our spheres of influence, whether it's online or face-to-face. And how we can just elevate and bring the richness to your school communities. And I think a big piece, as I'm reflecting on what we've already heard, is that Muslims are not a monolith, and that's something that you will continue to hear throughout. And so sometimes the best people to share what they would like or how they perform or go through Ramadan is asking, is asking in a very supportive stance, what can we do to support you at this time, right? We are not coming as like, we may have a little bit of expertise, we may have some information or resource from this resource actually today that you're going to hear about, or you've already looked at and kind of gone through, but it's also what we have in the building. There's a rich resource from there. I know alongside Kevin, for me at Beckett Farm, I'm actually trying to ask, I understand all the protocols for COVID, but I'm also trying to ask, what are the needs? Like really trying to look at, where in the divisions are these necessary and how can we continue to support? And the students sometimes have really great ideas that they'll come up and they're like, let's consider this, let's do this at this time. And have you thought about, giving us an opportunity like during our gym period, because we know we get very thirsty after gym. Can you also put it into place that if you need to be accommodated and sit out during gym, that's okay? And so having the courage to actually come up and think about that is because you've kept the space and the openness of communication and a supportive stance, right? So that's something to consider when you're going through this presentation, and the timeliness of this presentation. I mean, Ramadan is right around the corner for us. Like, we actually count down to when it begins, because it's a joyous time for us. It's a time for reflection and learning about ourselves, and that's important. Like, there are people who are counting down, who are thinking about what this month is going to be about, and so in their excitement, there's also the learning that we are doing at our end to provide the supports that we need. I know April break will take a chunk of Ramadan out for us, but then there's still 3 weeks coming back. And how does that look for our learners and for our community that we are going to be supporting throughout this time? So again, thank you very much for being here and recognizing the value of being in this space and learning.
So this is the main page, guided by questions. And these questions will guide you to resources that are embedded within the document. So a little background, because you're viewing in present mode, you don't know that there's many slides that are hidden within the deck. Certainly, you can look at it in a view mode, but it gets congested for the viewer to do that. And sometimes it overwhelms people and may stop them from going through. So the purpose is that each of these questions has an embedded link. The link pops you to a page further in the deck. And on that page further in the deck, there's a go back button. So there's a little instruction bar at the top. So that go back button pops you back to slide number 3, and you can continue on. Fahima, did you want to talk about the resources? Thanks. Oh, not yet. Yeah, there we go.
So some of the resources are existing resources that will help support staff as they work to answer their questions about how to support the multiple identities of Muslim staff and students who are observing Ramadan. There is no single narrative, and this work cannot become tokenistic.
It's really important that we understand and realize and recognize the emotional labor that Muslim staff, students, and families endure when working to create spaces where all know they matter and they belong. And this must also become the work of all of us in YRDSB, all of the staff. In a recent webinar, Samia Abdi said, act from whatever power you have within your circle of influence. It's not okay to not know better. And just to reflect on Kinto Patatan again, it means that people have been listened to by someone compassionate and fair and know that their needs will be taken seriously. So through the creation of the document and the shared space and relationships that have been developed through the work, a key point to take with you today is that what people really need is that when issues are raised, they know they will be taken seriously, and educators, administrators, school staff will interact. So as you go through the guide today, a question for you to consider. How will you be that someone who is compassionate and fair so that Muslim students and staff will know their needs will be heard and it will be moved forward? So there are resources embedded in here that were created in the past. Were created and shared by AEMS or media from our school board that share the experience of Muslim students and colleagues.
And so this page could be shared with staff in a staff meeting, for example, or in a lead teacher meeting, leadership teams. And so, you know, they are focused around key questions. So with your staff, you might want to take 2 or 3 key questions to share with the whole staff to explore the resources below and to be able to support our students. And so, you know, we want to create spaces for community to help our Muslim students and our non-Muslim students. And we recognize that, you know, there may be things that have happened in the past that, you know, were traumatic for students, and we need to do better. And so as we're going to actually go through each of the slides, each of the questions to explore the resources below, and members of the ESAC Faith Accommodations Working Group, as well as the Alliance for Educators for Muslim Students, will be speaking to each page. And so as we suggested before, you might actually want to engage with the resource and explore it yourself. So here we go. So before we actually start navigating through the questions, this is a key resource, and you'll notice if you looked at the slide deck that it is not a resource that is hidden. It's a resource that is slide number 4, just beyond the questions, because it's a foundational document for us to be able to support students in the school setting of different faiths. So just this morning, I listened to the Disrupting Islamophobia and Intersecting Oppressions in K-12 schools webcast that Ryan shared with all of you. And I'm going to share with you a few highlights from the webcast that were shared that provides context for the importance of our role in ensuring that we're creating the conditions so that our Muslim students and staff know that they matter and belong. So we need to remember that our system is not neutral, and that there's a significant amount of work that we need to do to allow our students and staff to know that they matter and belong. And we know from this year and what all of our students have been going through, the importance of what is in the director's annual plan, right? Our imperative to put our marginalized students at the center of the planning that we do and all that we do. And this is not just about curriculum, it's about the whole child and the supports that we wrap around our students and their families to support them to be their best selves. We do not want students to be wondering about what our school board is going to be doing to keep them safe as a Muslim student. We need to be proactive and use resources like this guideline and this resource that we're sharing with you today to have conversations with students and staff about how we can support them, as Fatima said and mentioned. And follow this guideline document, because we know that the needs, what needs to be put in place to support our Muslim students and staff during Ramadan and throughout the whole year. You know, and when we talk about exemptions of curriculum and supports that families need, this asking for this, you know, the school is in a position of power. And we need to keep in mind these power dynamics. Talking about faith is a very personal piece of who we are. And families work from a place of not wanting to upset the school, not wanting to upset their teachers, even though these are fundamental grounds within the Human Rights Code. And some of our families are fearful to ask. And this is why, as schools, we need to have an invitational approach to supporting families with faith accommodations. What we don't want is for our students, as a result of their experiences in schools, not being given the accommodations they need to go into the workplace years after elementary school, high school, university, and feel ashamed to ask for what they're entitled to based upon their faith, right? So we always want to keep that in mind and put in place what they need along the way. So the program Accommodations for Faith Purposes, this document that you see up on the screen, is really a system support for all of us in terms of our religious literacy in a public funded system, right? And the common considerations for religious accommodations, which are aspects of all of the school day that might be requests for faith purposes. And we should be looking towards ways to create environments where all the intersecting identities are celebrated, protected, and shared. And so we're going to go back to the main screen, and we're going to actually guide you through some of the questions on slide number 3. So we're going to start with actually the question down in the bottom left corner. And it's, how can I support my students at recess and lunchtime and snack time? And it guides you back to the program for faith accommodations guideline. which is really an essential resource in that it provides you with examples of how to provide accommodations for a variety of faiths in terms of what that looks like as part of the school day. And Fahima is going to share with us what resources will help us create inclusive classrooms.
Thank you, Kevin. So here we have compiled some of the resources from the board and some that were created by members of AEMS. And they're all centered around Ramadan and Eid. So you can click over each picture as there are hyperlinks to either board memos, Google folders, or documents. And there are some awesome posters you can print and hang up in and around your classroom. There are banners that you can use in your virtual Google Classroom, or arts and crafts that you can use for a Ramadan display in your schools. And there are also some great art activities and amazing books that feature Muslim characters, celebrations, and stories. The resources on this slide will provide some suggestions for educators to make classrooms more inclusive and create a safe space in which all cultures and ethnicities and beliefs are respected.
So what happens during the month of Ramadan?
So during the month of Ramadan, we have this resource here that will best inform you on how Muslim students and staff may be practicing Ramadan. Muslim students and staff will be fasting from dawn to sunset. And if you are wondering if they can, or if we can drink water, the answer is no. They abstain from eating or drinking during daylight hours. And Muslims are strongly encouraged to partake in their pre-dawn meal, which is called suhoor or sahri, in preparation for the fasting day. So this is kind of like our breakfast before we start fasting. And Muslims open or break their fast during sunset with a meal called iftar, which is our dinner. Muslims partake in Tarawih prayers that are performed only during the month of Ramadan by some Muslim communities. And these prayers take place in congregation following the night prayer. And the whole Quran is recited over the course of the month during these prayers.
What can schools do to show allyship during Ramadan to support the well-being and achievement of Muslim learners?
So here are some ways that you can support our Muslim learners within our schools. Students and families have the agency and the choice about being inside or outside for recess, how close they are to those classmates that are eating snacks and lunches, whether or not they need the space for calm and quiet spaces. And again, these needs may look different for each student. It's also important to understand that staff do not ask students or families to prove their stated needs in order for any of these points to be considered valid. Understanding, listening, and respecting our students' needs and wishes will help make our Muslim students feel like they matter and that they belong in our space.
Are there COVID-19 considerations for Ramadan?
Great question, Kevin. So due to COVID-19, many mosques and faith centers may be closed or open with very limited numbers. So for Muslim staff and students who may be feeling a sense of isolation as a result of observing Ramadan during the current context, they're encouraged to make use of the supports available to them listed towards the bottom of the document here. Some may even find observing Ramadan during the current context to be an opportunity for seclusion, reflection, and focus. So it might be a great thing for some, and it might not be so great for others. But either way, Muslim students may be relying on the use of their virtual and electronic resources extensively. Access to electronic devices and the internet throughout the day and night will support them in making use of these faith resources. This includes recitations of the Quran, spiritual educational lectures, and virtual gatherings.
So we want to note that the question, what accommodations for faith practices will support students and staff? This thought bubble takes us to the board page. So all the resources that you would need are all here. And this also guides you back as well to the other page that has some of the other resources. So this is kind of a one-stop shop for resources that can support you with faith accommodations. And it's the only thought bubble that takes you outside of the document. Okay, so question number 10, the question around how are we responding to families' requests for to modify instruction during Ramadan. And so this guides you to the framework for inviting and responding to requests for faith accommodations. And so the image that you see up on the screen is actually a revised version of the document that would be shared shortly, which really returns us, you'll notice in the title, it's titled A Framework for Inviting and Responding Requests for Faith Accommodations. The important piece is here, inviting, right? We want to have an invitational approach to be able to support the requests of our families. And so, you know, it's an essential resource. Many of you will be familiar with this. Really, this revision that will be coming out shortly is a return to its original form when it was shared with the system back in 2014. And so there are a few small changes in wording, but actually, if you click on the link on the page, it takes you to the current version, but we're hoping that this revision will be shared with the system shortly. What are Muslim and elementary and secondary students and staff telling us? So this takes us to a page that really shares for all of us in student, really coming from the student voice of our elementary and our secondary students, as well as our staff, a lot of what has been shared in the other slides that have been shared with you this evening. So it's kind of like the content in conversation from 3 different perspectives. So the first one is from students here at Stonebridge Public School, talking about what it means to be Muslim. And what they need from us as a staff to be able to support them during Ramadan. As well, the middle video is from a secondary perspective. And of course, the heart-to-heart sessions that have been offered by AEMS, which are exceptional opportunities to be part of a conversation. Really, this is a reflection on how staff and students can be supported during Ramadan as well. Okay, and so the final question is, do all students participate the same, particularly in virtual learning environments?
So no, not all students participate the same. And again, it's important to highlight that there are various ways our students may identify as being Muslim. Like I said before, other religious groups, or like other religious groups, Muslims are also diverse and shouldn't be classified by a stereotype. Communication between teachers and students before and during Ramadan will allow for a smooth transition into Ramadan for our Muslim virtual learners, especially given the fact that some of our older students don't turn on their cameras or their microphones, or they're not very active in the chat. Like some students I have, they're not active in the chat. They don't use their mic. So it's hard to even ask a question posed to the entire class and hear back from them. So it might be beneficial to reach out to them via email or take them into a breakout room group and ask them if they have any suggestions or requests during the month, or if they might be away or late or whatnot. It's a great way to also keep communication lines open between school and home through email. It will also be very beneficial. And to best support our virtual students during Ramadan, we should understand that their prayers and the timing for their prayers may cause them to be late in the mornings, afternoons, after lunch, or even be away from their computers. Prayer can take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. They may be absent during some days to prioritize faith practices. The last 10 days of the 30-day month of Ramadan are the most sacred. Some students and some families might be spending the entire night in prayer and reflection, so they might be absent, they might be late, and participation in subjects such as physical education, music, drama, dance, and other curricular activities might look different for our Muslim students. Again, very important to note that this isn't the case for all of them. So communication is best to find out what our Muslim learners need from us.